My brother, the sports star, crashed my car and ran away. Parents ordered me to wait for the police in his place, but they forgot one tiny detail. The steam hissing from the crushed radiator of my Toyota Camry sounded like a dying snake. It was the only sound in the alleyway, aside from the distant, retreating slap of expensive sneakers against pavement. Hudson didn't even look back. He just ran, his Golden Bears varsity jacket flashing under the streetlights before disappearing around the corner. I stood there, shivering in the cool October air, staring at the destruction. My car, the one I had worked 3 part-time jobs to buy, was embedded in the glass storefront of Lusso, the most expensive boutique in town. A mannequin, dressed in a gown that cost more than my tuition, was draped over my hood like a corpse. I reached for my phone to call 911, but a black SUV screeched to a halt behind me. My parents. They must have been tracking my phone, or maybe Hudson had called them while he was fleeing. My mother was out of the car before it fully stopped. She didn't look at me. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She marched straight to the driver's side door of my wrecked car and peered inside. "No airbags," she announced, her voice sharp and calculating. "Good. No DNA on the bags." "Hudson could have killed someone?" I said, my voice trembling. My chest ached where the seatbelt had dug in during the impact. I had been in the passenger seat. Hudson had demanded to drive because he wanted to feel the handling. He was drunk, of course. He was always drunk on Friday nights. My father walked over to me. He was a tall man, imposing, the kind of man who commanded boardrooms and little league games with equal tyranny. He looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "Blair, listen to me closely," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous low register he used when he was brokering a deal. "Hudson has the draft next month. The scouts are watching his every move. A DUI, a hit and run. It's over. His life is over." "He did this," I snapped, gesturing to the shattered glass. "He needs to face the consequences." "And you," my mother interjected, turning to face me. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. "You have, what? A degree in English literature? You are replaceable, Blair. Hudson is a prodigy. We have invested millions in his training. We are not letting you ruin this investment because of a fender bender." "Fender bender? He drove through a building." "Here is the reality," my father said, stepping into my personal space. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. "You are going to wait here. You are going to tell the police you were driving. You swerved to avoid a stray dog. You panicked." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I won't do it. I'm not taking a criminal record for him." My father didn't blink. "If you don't, we stop paying for college immediately. You will be evicted from your apartment by Monday. We will cut off your insurance, your phone, and your access to the emergency fund. You will be on the street, Blair. Do you understand? No family, no money, no future." I felt the blood drain from my face. They knew I was 1 semester away from graduating. They knew I had no savings because I spent it all on this car. They held the keys to my entire existence. "Make the choice, Blair," my mother hissed. "Be a sister or be a stranger." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The red and blue lights began to bounce off the brick walls of the alley. I looked at my ruined car, then at my parents. They weren't looking at me with love. They were looking at me like I was an employee who needed to fall on a grenade. "Fine," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "I'll do it." "Good girl," my father said. Then, he did something that broke whatever tiny piece of affection I had left for him. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a silver flask, and unscrewed the cap. "Hold still," he commanded. Before I could react, he splashed the pungent whiskey all over my chest and neck. The cold liquid soaked into my hoodie, making me reek of alcohol. "Now you look the part," he said, capping the flask and wiping his fingerprints off it with a handkerchief. "Remember, you were driving. You were drinking. You are sorry." He tossed the flask into the passenger seat of my car. "We're leaving," my mother said, already moving back to the SUV. "Don't mess this up." They drove away, leaving me alone in the wreckage, smelling like a distillery, waiting for the police to ruin my life. The holding cells smelled of stale urine and industrial bleach. I sat on the metal bench, my knees pulled to my chest, shivering in my whiskey-soaked hoodie. I had been processed, fingerprinted, and mugshot like a common criminal. The interrogation had been a nightmare. The officers didn't believe my story about the dog, but the evidence was overwhelming. I smelled like booze, the car was mine, and I had confessed. I blew a 0.00 on the breathalyzer, which confused them, but the officer simply noted that I must have sobered up, or was on something else. They charged me with reckless driving and leaving the scene of an accident, a technicality, since the car had come to a rest inside the store, but I hadn't called 911 immediately. My parents bailed me out at 6 a.m. The ride home was silent. Not a comfortable silence, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb waiting to go off. When we walked into the house, the smell of bacon and coffee hit me. Hudson was sitting at the kitchen island, laughing at something on his phone. He looked fresh, rested, and completely unbothered. He didn't even look up when I walked in, looking like a wreck. "You're welcome," I muttered as I passed him. He glanced up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Rough night, sis. You should really learn to handle your liquor." I stopped dead. My hands curled into fists. "You think this is funny?" "Hudson, eat your breakfast," my mother said soothingly, pouring him fresh orange juice. She turned to me, her face instantly hardening. "Blair, go to your room. We've taken your phone and laptop. You are grounded until the trial." Grounded? I'm 21 years old. "You are living under our roof, dependent on our money," my father said, not looking up from his newspaper. "And considering the legal fees we are about to incur cleaning up your mess, you will do exactly as you are told." "My mess?" I screamed. "He crashed my car." "Lower your voice." My father slammed his hand on the table. "The narrative is set. You were driving. If you deviate from that story now, you will be charged with filing a false police report and perjury. You are in too deep to swim back, Blair. Own it." I looked at Hudson. He winked at me. A quick, subtle wink that said, "I win, you lose." I went to my room and collapsed on the bed. The next 3 days were a blur of humiliation. My parents brought in a high-priced lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling who smelled like sulfur and mints. He didn't ask me what happened. He handed me a script. "You've been under a lot of stress at school," Sterling rehearsed with me. "You turned to alcohol to cope." This was a cry for help. "We're going to plead no contest and ask for probation and mandatory rehab. It will stay on your record, but you'll avoid jail time." "I don't need rehab," I said dully. "You do if you want to stay in this family," my mother said from the corner of the room. They were systematically dismantling my identity. I overheard my mother on the phone with my aunt, spinning a sob story about my mental breakdown and hidden addiction. They were poisoning the well. Even if I eventually told the truth, no one would believe the unstable, alcoholic daughter over the golden boy athlete and his respectable parents. I felt trapped in a tightening spiral. Every attempt to defend myself was met with a threat to cut off my tuition. Every plea for fairness was met with a reminder of Hudson's potential. On the 4th night of my confinement, I hit rock bottom. I was lying on the floor of my room, staring at the ceiling, realizing that my life as I knew it was over. I would be the family pariah, the failure, the cautionary tale. Hudson would go to the NHL, make millions, and I would be the sister he graciously supported while whispering about my issues to the press. I rolled over and saw my car keys on the dresser. They had towed the wreck to a junkyard, but the police had given the personal effects back to my father, who had dumped them in my room. I stared at the keychain, a simple plastic fob. And then I remembered the tiny detail. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack the bone. I sat up, grabbing the keys. 2 weeks ago, after a rash of break-ins in my college town, I had installed a dash cam. But not just any dash cam. I had splurged on the Van True N4 Pro. It had a front cabin lens, a rear lens, and, most importantly, a cloud sync feature that uploaded footage instantly when it detected a collision, provided there was a Wi-Fi signal. The accident happened right outside Luso. Luso offers free high-speed Wi-Fi to its customers. My phone used to connect to it automatically whenever I walked past. The camera was synced to my phone's hotspot settings, but had it connected to the store's open network? I needed a computer. My parents had confiscated my laptop and phone. I waited until 2 a.m. The house was silent. I crept out of my room, avoiding the squeaky floorboard in the hallway that I had memorized as a child. I went downstairs to Hudson's gaming lair in the basement. Hudson was asleep upstairs. His massive gaming PC hummed in sleep mode. I wiggled the mouse. The screens flared to life, bathing the room in blue light. I typed in his password, PuckLife99, because he was an idiot who never changed it. I opened a browser and incognito tab. I logged into my cloud account. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped the password twice. Access granted. I clicked on the events folder. There it was. A file dated 4 days ago. 11:42 p.m. I clicked play. The video showed the chaotic blur of the crash, the airbag deploying in Hudson's face. Then silence. Then Hudson scrambling out. But the audio was crystal clear. And because the camera had a parking mode with a battery backup, it kept recording even after the engine died. I watched the screen, mesmerized. I saw my parents' SUV pull up. I heard the entire conversation. No airbags. Good. No DNA. "You are replaceable, Blair." And the pièce de résistance, the clear, high-definition video of my father uncapping his flask and splashing alcohol onto me while I cried. I had them. I had the smoking gun. I quickly downloaded the file. I needed to send it to someone safe, not the police. My father played golf with the chief, not Mr. Sterling. I thought of Nana, my grandmother on my mother's side. She had passed away 2 years ago, leaving a massive trust fund. My parents controlled it, but there was a family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who hated my father. He was the executor of the estate. I composed an email to Mr. Henderson. Subject, evidence of fraud and coercion. I attached the video. I hovered the mouse over send. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice made me jump so hard I knocked the keyboard off the desk. I spun around. My father was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He wasn't wearing his pajamas. He was dressed in slacks and a dress shirt, as if he hadn't slept. He held a baseball bat in one hand, an autographed souvenir from Hudson's Little League days. I stammered. He walked over, calm and terrifying. He looked at the screen. He saw the paused video frame of himself holding the flask. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply reached out and pressed the power button on the tower, holding it down until the screen went black. "You think you're clever," he said softly. "We canceled the internet service to this room an hour ago. I saw the router activity spike on my phone app. You're offline, Blair." My stomach dropped. The email hadn't sent. "Give me the flash drive," he said, noticing the USB stick I had tried to back up the file to. "No." He stepped closer, raising the bat slightly, not to hit me, but to threaten the equipment. "I will smash every piece of electronics in this house before I let you ruin this family. Hand it over." Trembling, I handed him the drive. He dropped it on the floor and crushed it under the heel of his shoe. "You have no proof," he said, his voice void of emotion. "And now you have no privileges. Tomorrow we go to court. You will plead guilty. And after that I am sending you to a residential treatment facility in Nevada. For your mental health. You won't have access to a computer for a very, very long time." He grabbed my arm and dragged me up the stairs. He shoved me into my room and I heard the click of the deadlock from the outside. I sank to the floor. I had played my hand and I had lost. I was going to lose my freedom, my name, and my sanity. They had won. The courtroom was sterile and cold, smelling of floor wax and old wood. I sat next to Mr. Sterling, who was chatting amiably with the prosecutor. My parents sat in the gallery behind me, the picture of supportive, grieving parents dealing with a troubled child. Hudson wasn't there. He had practice. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Keller entered. He was a stern man with a reputation for being tough on DUIs. "Case number 4,920, the clerk read. "State versus Blair Montgomery." "How do you plead?" the judge asked. Mr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, my client pleads." I looked at the table. My hands were folded. I felt dead inside. But then I looked at the court stenographer's laptop. I looked at the digital display on the wall used for evidence, and I remembered the actual tiny detail. My father was a businessman. He understood leverage, money, and intimidation. But he didn't understand tech. He thought cutting the Wi-Fi in the basement stopped the upload. But the Vantrue N4 Pro doesn't just use Wi-Fi. It has a built-in 4G LTE SIM card slot for real-time cloud backup, independent of local networks. I had inserted a prepaid data card months ago. The video hadn't just been on the computer screen. It was on the manufacturer's cloud server, accessible from anywhere. And last night, before my father came down, while I was waiting for the computer to boot, I had used the smart TV remote in the basement to access my cloud account via the TV's browser and set it to auto-forward to the district attorney's public tip line email. I stood up, interrupting my lawyer. "I plead not guilty, Your Honor," I said, my voice ringing clear in the silence. "Blair, sit down," Mr. Sterling hissed, grabbing my elbow. "And," I continued, shaking him off, "I would like to submit new evidence that proves obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and insurance fraud." "Objection!" Mr. Sterling shouted, panic flaring in his eyes. "My client is mentally unstable." "Ms. Montgomery," Judge Keller peered over his glasses. "What evidence?" "The prosecution has it in their inbox as of 6 hours ago," I said, along with a copy sent to the State Bar Association and the NHL Ethics Committee. The prosecutor, a young woman named Ms. Vance, frowned and checked her laptop. Her eyes went wide. She looked at me, then at my parents, then at the judge. "Your Honor," Ms. Vance said, her voice changing from bored to predatory. "We need a recess. I have a video file here labeled the truth that, well, you need to see this." "Play it," the judge ordered. "Now." "No." My father stood up in the gallery. "This is a violation of privacy. I do not consent. Sit down, sir, or you will be held in contempt, the judge barked. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The audio boomed through the courtroom speakers. Everyone watched. They watched Hudson crash. They watched him run. They watched my mother inspect the damage like a cold-blooded lizard. They watched my father pour whiskey on his own daughter. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and delicious. I turned around to look at my parents. My mother was pale, clutching her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. My father looked like he had been struck by lightning. He was staring at the screen, watching his own career and reputation disintegrate in 4K resolution. Bailiff. Judge Keller's voice was like ice. Take Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery into custody immediately and issue an arrest warrant for Hudson Montgomery. As the officers moved in, handcuffing my parents in front of the entire gallery, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I realized I still had the burner phone I had swiped from Hudson's desk during the chaos of the arrest. It was an email notification from Mr. Henderson, my grandmother's lawyer. I had managed to CC him on the auto-forward. Dear Blair, I have received the video. Under the moral turpitude and betrayal clause of your grandmother's trust, your parents are hereby stripped of their trusteeship effective immediately. The entire principal of the estate, $5 million, transfers to you solely, as you are the only remaining beneficiary in good standing. I watched my father being dragged out the double doors, shouting about his rights. My mother was weeping, not for me, but for the shame. I turned back to the judge. The nightmare was over. I was alone, yes, but I was rich. I was free, and for the first time in my life, I was in the driver's seat. Ms. Montgomery, the judge said gently, case dismissed. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright afternoon sun. I didn't look back. I had a plane to catch. I heard Europe was beautiful this time of year,